Hi, I'm Christian Martirano, and I'm here with American Music and Sound, representing Kurzweil products, here with GearWire. Today I'm going to be showing you and explaining a little bit about what makes Kurzweil products so different than other competitors. The Kurzweil PC3x is the latest in generation from Kurzweil product. This is the 88-note hammer-weighted action. They also have a little brother we'll be discussing later in another video called the Kurzweil PC3LE. But let's get started talking about the Kurzweil architecture. Back in 1992 or so, Kurzweil brought out their incredible VAST engine. The acronym VAST stood for Variable Architecture Synthesis Technology. That architecture is an extremely flexible synthesizer architecture that allows the user to manipulate DSP blocks and wiring diagrams to create interesting synthesis patterns. If you look at software programs such as Reactor or Max, Kurzweil is the hardware equivalent in that you can move these blocks around, modulate them independently, very, very flexible. So let's talk a little bit about workstations in general. The Kurzweil PC3x is a 128-voice architecture. Each voice allows you to run through a series of DSP blocks. Again, you can wire them up in the order that you choose. You can modulate them independently, and then you have an amplitude output that sends into an effects section. The cool thing about the latest generation Kurzweil is you can have these complicated effects chains that actually travel with the program. So if you're sequencing or you're building a more complex combination, the effects from the individual programs stay with the programs. That's because there's a lot of DSP horsepower added to the new generation. In this particular generation, you can have up to 32 individual voices, or layers we're going to call them, to make a single program. Just to give a contrast, in a Korg workstation, you have 2 oscillators. Each oscillator can have up to 4 components, 4 different sounds, but you can't modulate them separately. They still function as oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 when it comes to modulation. In Kurzweil, every one of the 32 components, we'll call them layers, which is our terminology, can be modulated completely independently and separately. So you really can stack up, almost in a crude kind of an additive way, a huge stack of sounds, modulating them differently, in fact splitting and layering them in the normal program mode as well. In the Yamaha architecture of their latest workstation, you can have 8 elements per voice. In Roland, 4. Again, Kurzweil, it's 32. When we move to Kurzweil's more complex grouping, the combination mode they call setup here. Korg uses the term combi, Roland uses performance. But in Kurzweil terms, the setups, you can then take 16 of these 32 layered programs and combine them again. Extremely flexible. So while we have black and white keys and sliders and a display and wheels, what's under the hood really differentiates Kurzweil from everyone else. So VAST was in 1992, was supported up through the K2600 series in roughly 2003, 2004. They now have what they call dynamic VAST, which is taking that architecture and greatly enhancing it. Now the user, instead of selecting pre-selected wiring diagrams for how they would wire up their filters and their DSP blocks, now the user can create their own wiring diagrams. Again, very, very powerful architecture. Okay, let's take a look at a program and get under the hood and take a look at what VAST is all about. In this case, dynamic VAST. I press the edit button and I'm presented with a key map. Here we have a piano as a key map. Here's my key map soft key that relates, that would bring me to this page. This takes me to some layer parameters I can adjust, high and low values for the range on the keyboard, the velocity ranges, other parameters that are very interesting. But when I get to algorithm, this is where I start to see this wiring diagram that I was speaking about, where the user can select different wiring diagrams and DSP and actually create them. So as I select through algorithm numbers, we'll see these boxes change and wiring diagrams change around them that show me signal path coming in. If I want to edit any one of these wiring diagrams, I can press the edit button, and now I see I'm inside the actual algorithm. I can highlight down to a particular place, one of these boxes, select which DSP function might be in there, select the input, and determine whether I want to route around that box or I want to bring in from another layer into this box and create some kind of a parallel routing, join them back together here, and then sum them in the final block. So it's very powerful. If I want any of the inputs to a box, I just highlight it. Now I can disable that, so this triangle wave is now floating by itself. It's no longer feeding into the chain. I can bring this in now from another layer to feed the second box and have another layer above coming in to feed the triangle wave. So it's very flexible as you go through and you start to change these wires around and make different paths. You have a very soft environment to create a synthesis structure that you want. As I go to number of blocks, this will determine how much DSP horsepower I'm using, and also the type of DSP function that I'm selecting is going to be usually larger types of application. I'll go back to a different wiring diagram here. I only want one input. I'll also select only one input here. So I check, this is the algorithm I started from. I want to go to an algorithm that gives me more horsepower. This particular first block is a huge amount of DSP used for these low-pass filters, very high resolution. There's a Moog type filter. There's also a sync saw. This is DSP generated, not sample based. Super saw, sync square, triple saw. So these are very, very cool DSP functions. Again, if I want to edit any of these algorithms, I just highlight the algorithm number, hit edit, and I can change the routing or change what's inside the block. So that's a little bit of what's going on in VAST. You'll see the number of algorithms is extremely high. So there's all different kinds of algorithms already pre-decided for you, but you can edit and change any of them. And again, all you do is scroll to a box and decide what DSP. There are many per box. So you decide what you want in the first box, maybe a high pass followed by a saw, followed by some kind of a different square wave. Now this would be two oscillators sounding. And your key map also is feeding into this. So the key map is a piano. You might want another kind of a waveform. So now we have three waveforms in this algorithm, a sine wave, a saw, and a square. That's still a single voice. When you play a note, it's still one of the 128 channels. So very powerful, different under-the-hood architecture. So this is what makes Kurzweil different. One other thing, we have a library legacy that started back in the early 1990s that now has been supported because our architecture has come forward with a great deal of similarity. People have built libraries over 10 years. The new generation Kurzweil PC3x, or the PC3K rather, is coming out soon, which will read our old legacy library as well, allowing those people to bring all that work forward with them. Programs that are created in the PC3X can be loaded into the little brother, the PC3LE, which we'll talk about later. So there is compatibility between the models as well.